This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thrilled to announce the release of my new book, Obama's True Legacy: How He Transformed America. There's a reason why Mike Huckabee calls it a ferocious and chilling read. Order it now at Amazon.com or at FrontPageMag.com.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. I am not Jamie Glazov, but I'm Michael Finch, the president of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and it's a real honor to be here tonight. Before I start with an introduction of our very special guest, should be an incredible evening, but I want to remind everyone to please go to the Glazov Gang, subscribe at YouTube and Rumble, visit jamieglazov.com, subscribe to the newsletter, and most importantly, please make a donation to keep the Glazov Gang on air. It's a wonderful show, excellent show, great forum. And I know we would appreciate, and Jamie would appreciate your support. Many of you already donate, so hope you can help. This is such an honor to be able to introduce my special guest and a fellow colleague here at the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and that is Daniel Greenfield. Daniel is not a stranger to the Glazov Gang. I haven't hosted in a number of years, but when I was asked by Jamie, and it's a great honor, thank you, Jamie, for entrusting me with this being host tonight, I could think of no one better than Daniel Greenfield to be with us tonight. Many of you know Daniel or know of Daniel, but I just want to remind you all, he's the Vice President of Special Projects at the David Horowitz Freedom Center and a Shillman Fellow at the Freedom Center. He writes at frontpagemag.com and is the editor of Front Page's blog, The Point. You can also read Daniel at his website, sultankanish.org. I urge you to go there if you can. He is the author of a great number of pamphlets published by the Freedom Center and his just published book, you've probably seen this, but Domestic Enemies, the Founding Fathers Fight Against the Left. You can get this book and many of the all his pamphlets, if you go to frontpagemag.com and go to the bookstore. You can also order Domestic Enemies on Amazon, of course. Daniel is just now launched a new project with the Freedom Center called Freedom Center Investigates, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. The Freedom Center has a long tradition of investigative journalism, and Freedom Center Investigates will take that to a new level by exposing corruption and abuses at every level, from the upcoming election to the inner workings of the deep state. Daniel, of course, is our leading investigative journalist. He is going to head this program. And already in just a few months since this launch of the program, Daniel has broke stunning stories like a Pakistani government official being one of Joe Biden's biggest donors, and a secret deal involving the Biden family and the Chinese investment bank. So there's a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack. I want to mention one pamphlet that Daniel wrote, he edited. It's called Beijing Biden, The Secret Relationship with China That Threatens America. Okay, great pamphlet. But Daniel, Joe Biden is withdrawn from the race. I would like to say we're done with Joe Biden. There's nothing else to worry about, nothing else to investigate. We're free and clear, so we can close down the center's project, Freedom Center Investigates. Something tells me that you would disagree with that there is still much to investigate, starting with the two candidates, the presidential candidate, Vice President Kamala Harris, and of course, the Vice President candidate, Tim Walz, the governor from Minnesota. Do you concur that we still have a lot to worry about and we need to keep the investigative project alive and well?
Well, I don't know. I mean, when I think of California politics, I think of them as being so incredibly squeaky clean. Actually, in the past 3 or 4 hours or so, I've been swimming in a sewer, pretty literal sewer, because I've been in San Francisco, which was where Kamala Harris really got the start of her political career, with folks that people know, like Roy Brown, and folks people may not know, like Mohammed Nuru or Mr. Clean. And, I've actually just completed an article now, Kamala's Culture of Corruption, which delved into moments from her career, scenes from a very bad political marriage, one might say, included moments when Nuru, who's now spending 7 years in prison, was forcing workers to go ahead, and a lot of these workers were ex-cons or drug addicts, to go ahead and file absentee ballots for Kamala Harris at a Kamala Harris event back when she was running for the DA of San Francisco, and the crew chiefs would actually be looking over their shoulders and ask for their ballot receipts to make sure that they cast absentee ballots for Kamala. You know, we talk about ballot harvesting and all this stuff. This was really where it took off, and this was a big part of Kamala Harris's career, and it is absolutely worth looking into. And, you know, if I may mention a competitor, I was just on Newsmax TV talking about how Governor Walz, who, of course, as we are told over and over again, was a great educator, really fantastic educator, who took student test scores in the state to a 30-year low. Wow, yeah, indeed. At this point, less than half the students in the state can read at grade proficiency level. Something like 45% are actually able to do math at grade proficiency level. Science scores at 39%, which means 60% of the state's students cannot do math. That's how great of an educator Governor Walz is. And very interestingly enough, back when Governor Pavlenti, who was a Republican, was in office, those scores were in the 70s. You know, 74% of students in the state could actually read at grade proficiency level. In 2017, before Walz runs for office, still at, I believe, 60-something%. Walz takes it down to a 30-year low. And that's, you know, a record people should actually be aware of, because there's a lot of noise in politics, a lot of insults, a lot of back and forth. And we look at the hard numbers, the information, the stories behind the stories.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, Barack Obama at least kind of paid lip service or pretended to support charter schools. He was never in favor of vouchers, but there's always been kind of some Democrats that support at least the idea, in theory, of charter schools. The mask is off with Biden, Harris, and Walz. They are very antagonistic towards charter schools, which at the bare minimum is obviously desperately needed. And the one thing, you know, Governor Walz, the summer of love of 2020 and all the riots, the burning of the police precinct, all that is at his feet. So I'm not sure what kind of record he's going to be able to run on, but there's no question Harris is kind of riding an emotional wave right now. And you've kind of touched on a couple of things. You know, Harris doesn't have the record. Joe Biden's got a 100-year record. Obviously, it's easy to dig into. Harris, it's not quite as deep. So you really have to dig. You've mentioned a couple of things. Is there anything else that is particularly alarming? You've already written a lot just in a short period of time, and I know you've got more coming out about Kamala Harris. Is there anything else in particular that you find really alarming that we need to know about and should be scared about?
Well, there's quite a bit. Yes, she does not have the same track record, but she came out of a political machine that's even worse than the one that Biden came out of in Delaware. One that there was a premium on, conducting politically correct investigations, going after people, go after Planned Parenthood, going after the NRA, all the stuff. But the flip side there was a deliberate refusal to look into corruption, whether it was in PG&E, whether there was Caltrans, in CalPERS, in the big California state institutions. So Kamala was definitely a team player, and it was Team Lori Brown. Then it was Team Joe Biden. At some point, it's going to be potentially Team Kamala Harris. And that is a worrying thought, because she's had a record not as a prosecutor, not as an investigator, but as somebody who helps the big boys cover everything up under the guise of diversity and, wearing a skirt and a necklace. But it was the same good old boy politics. And there's also a lot of materials that we've taken a look at. Particularly, it's always good to follow the money. In the case of Kamala, you can look at her donors, and you can also look at family members. Now, with Joe Biden, there was always Hunter Biden. There was this complicated setup where you had a lot of money moving through front groups to families, and it was a very convoluted process. It's a less convoluted process because Kamala's husband, Doug Emhoff, is a lawyer. He was a partner at two major law firms, Venable and DLA Piper. And it was interesting because when Doug and Kamala get together and they have this beautiful romance, Kamala said that she could have, been very wealthy, but she decided to go into public service. Well, her husband is the one who's actually bringing in the money. And the interesting thing was, when they got married, suddenly the lawyers in his firm start donating a whole lot of money to her campaigns. And then when he moves on to DLA Piper, suddenly a lot of lawyers from DLA Piper are donating to Kamala. And it's very instructive to look at some of the clients at those law firms, because even when Doug wasn't personally representing those clients, he did represent some odd, troubling clients, including an arms dealer who was indicted for moving money and weapons. But even when he wasn't representing the clients themselves as a partner in the law firm, he's benefiting from it. The firm's interests are also his interests. And it's also instructive to look at Kamala's donors. One of the big questions was, why did Joe Biden pick Kamala in the first place? What does she bring to the ticket? Yes, he promised that he would pick a black woman.
Yeah.
He was the only black female senator, so it was either pick her or, get Corey to put on a wig. So, but Kamala's big asset, the big asset during the primary, she did not actually get through a single primary or score a single vote the last time around, but she could raise money like crazy. And this is something that's accompanied her throughout her career. She was able to raise money from powerful California interests. She's expanded that. She now has Silicon Valley and Wall Street pouring money into her coffers. And there are all these fawning media stories. She raised $200 million. She raised $400 million. She raised $500 million. She raised $5 trillion. And it's coming uncritically from the same media that normally is supposed to be very suspect. Money to elections. That's dubious. There's something shady going on there. And now they're cheerleading. Joy, $400 million have been raised. And they're not actually looking at any of those interests, where that money is coming from. We've been doing some of that. We've looked at where some of that money is coming from. It's coming out of Wall Street. It's coming out of Silicon Valley. It's coming from political interests, by the way, that have also links to communist China. Joy.
Well, you mentioned China, communist China, Daniel. I wanted to swing back to Governor Tim Walz for a second. He's had a long lifetime love affair with the Chinese government and China. He spent a lot of time there. It reminds me a little bit of Bernie Sanders when he talked about the Soviet Union. Bernie's old enough, obviously, to have spent some time in the Soviet Union. He loved the Soviet Union. He was an apologist for the Soviet Union. The difference is Bernie never got that close to the White House. He failed. Tim Walz could become the next vice president. You've written a little bit about this. How troubling and dangerous is his ties? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. How dangerous is Tim Walz with these ties to China?
No, we've had questions in the past. We've had questions about Bill Clinton's trip to Russia in the past. We've had some serious questions raised about John Kerry's activities, but there's been nobody like Walz. It's absolutely unprecedented because this guy was picked out right out of college. He goes off to teach for a year in China, which is maybe not that big of a deal, but he gushes about being treated like royalty. Again, his words, newspaper coverage from the time. And then he makes a friend in China's Foreign Affairs Department, which is odd because you're teaching, you're just going to China to teach for a bit. Then you suddenly have a friend in China's Foreign Affairs Department, or handler, to be polite about it. I'm not sure what the exact Mandarin translation is. This friend or handler finds a whole bunch of Chinese government money so that Walz is able to start a company that takes students on tour to China where they're told about the wonders of the Chinese government. And he goes on to make 30 trips to China. At this point, he's also serving in the National Guard. He's heroically serving in the National Guard until the moment he's actually asked to go somewhere past China to a war zone. And of course, he refuses to do that. But it's a very troubling relationship because he has a relationship as a seemingly private citizen with China, where seemingly he is actually profiting from that relationship with China, and he's pushing Chinese propaganda. He's bringing American students into China. Then he runs for Congress. He runs for Congress, by the way, with an association with the Kerry campaign. He completely lies about getting a start there. It really begins his trail of telling all sorts of lies about his military service, but I digress. In Congress, he's actually on the China committee. Then he runs for governor. You would think that's it. The relationship with China is over. He's going to send a Dear John or a Dear Z letter, but no, instead, China is actually very interested in infiltrating state governments at the local level. They understand the federal level things can be more challenging. There's more scrutiny, but at the state level, there is very, very little scrutiny. That makes things possible, like an event where Governor Walz shows up to speak at a Chinese Communist Front Group organization, one that was actually created by communist sympathizers back in the day who made no bones about it. They were pretty open about them being communists. This was discussed in the Revolution magazine at the time. They're having all these ideological Marxist-Leninist arguments. And then he shows up and he's there. And also there is the head of China's Foreign Influence Department that is actually dedicated to embedding themselves inside state governments. And before this, Walz has been going around and knocking Trump's tariffs and saying, he's just looking out for the farmers of Minnesota. And maybe you could believe that some politicians would say things like that. Maybe, they're actually just focused on local trade. But this is a guy who's had a decades-long relationship with China. He seemed to have hooked up with a handler there pretty much out of the gate. Seemingly, he was actually profiting from communist China. All this should, raise red flags. There was a time when somebody with this kind of track record would not have gotten a security clearance in a million years. The fact that this kind of thing is not even remarked upon shows how bad things have become.
Well, this is kind of not a segue, but I have to ask the question. I mean, a lot of people read your blog, Daniel. They're reading your information. You've been quoted on the House floor. Mark Levin's must have a research team that reads your blog every day because you're quoted on shows like Mark Levin. But how do we I wasn't aware of a lot of this stuff. I mean, I just assumed he was a small town governor from Minnesota, football coach, that he kind of milked that, what Joe Biden is, about being from Scranton. I mean, I would have never thought that Tim Walz had any of these kind of associations. So you've opened a lot of eyes, but how do we get this information? And maybe it's an unanswerable question, but how do we get this information to the American public so they can make a reasoned decision? And you're right, he shouldn't have ever gotten that kind of a clearance. And I guess we know why that happens. People are turning a blind eye, but it is difficult and probably a little frustrating for you that we're not getting more people to be aware of this information. So I don't know if that's an answerable question. It's a frustration, but this is critical knowledge that has to land in front of American people.
I agree, it is very important. And it's also important sometimes, there's a lot of back and forth, there's a lot of political noise. It's important to actually present facts that are backed up by clear evidence. Because as fun as the insults are, and the insults can be fun, the noise can be fun, people actually need to be able to make decisions based on the facts. And you just have to do your best. You have to actually put the information out there. I've been doing that. You've been doing that. We've been working together on that. A few days ago, I was on Newsmax talking about Walz's record on education. I've tried to make the rounds, radio shows, podcasts, and spread awareness of this. But the reality is we're obviously going to be shouting, we're very much swimming against the stream because the media is obviously leveraged against us. And there's a lot of people who prefer entertainment, and entertainment can be fun, to actual facts and research.
I'm going to kind of segue now I want to talk about the IRS because I know you spent a lot of time. This is really, really frightening. I mean, it's all frightening. I think the more you do this investigating, Daniel, you're looking into a house of horrors that just is deeper and deeper. Talk about having to deal, getting through the sewer. Most of the listeners know that Freedom Center's almost 6 years into an IRS audit. The main issue being that we wrote some critical articles of Hillary Clinton at Front Page in 2016. So it's a witch hunt. We're being persecuted by the IRS. You know that. I think a lot of the listeners know that. And yet when I read some of the stuff, investigating stuff that you've done, we see violent attacks on Congress, street riots, vandalism, international terrorism, all funded by 501c3s and C4 nonprofits with the complicity of the IRS. Now, I read that and I'm thinking, it's not hyperbole, but it's not exaggerated, but people are going to hear that and say, oh, come on. These are just left, Democrat or liberal groups that have a different opinion on things. Please enlighten us when you talk about, when you write that, what exactly are we talking about? You claim these groups are tied to the Democrat Party's donor base. What does that mean? And again, how serious, what kind of organizations has the IRS completely either been complicit or just turning their back and not paying attention to? How bad are these left-wing groups?
We were just talking about Chinese communist influence operations in the United States. Those are 501c3s. The very organizations that China is using to corrupt, influence Americans, organizations, by the way, that the FBI has warned about, that the Department of Homeland Security has warned about, that Senate hearings have warned about, they're able to operate as nonprofits with the complicity of the IRS. Now, the IRS has gone after us. They've gone after a variety of Christian, conservative, pro-Israel groups. Chinese communist organizations are allowed to operate with complete impunity by the IRS. I am not aware of a single incident where the IRS actually launched an investigation into a Chinese communist espionage operation that is a nonprofit, which means that it's effectively taxpayer subsidized. So not only are the Chinese spying on us, not only are they trying to subvert and undermine us, the IRS is letting them do it. The IRS is letting them be nonprofits, which is absolutely mind-blowing.
That's unbelievable. Well, I'm going to ask you about just a couple of organizations. You just wrote a column about an article about the Action Network, another organization. Oh, I want to do a kind of a plug if I could. The Freedom Center also hosts the website discoverthenetworks.org, which is an incredible encyclopedia of the left. A lot of these profiles and organizations, Daniel, I know you cross-pollinate with Discover the Networks, get information and provide Discover the Networks a lot of information. I want to urge our readers not just to go to frontpagemag.com, but please go to discoverthenetworks.org. It's a treasure trove. It can be depressing on how deep this left-wing network is, but that was the brainchild of David Horowitz many years ago. I'm going to ask you about the Action Network, but I think we're about we're going to do a very short break on behalf of our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. My Pillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new My Pillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit mypillow.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Glazov Gang, and I'm Michael Finch, president of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. We have a very special guest today, the vice president of programs at the Freedom Center and Shillman fellow, Daniel Greenfield. So again, welcome back, Daniel. And this Action Network, I read that, and you kind of get a chill down the spine. And I know that's probably one of many organizations. Can you fill us in a little bit about how bad this organization is, what they're doing, how that's linked to Kamala Harris and the Democrat Party? Talk about electioneering, but some of the things, can you give us just a few minutes on what is the Action Network? Because that's kind of a test case of a lot of organizations that you could profile. But if we could talk about that one for a second, that would be great.
I mean, I have to say I'm shocked that you would suggest there's anything wrong with the Action Network, just because they host something called the Antifa Defense Fund to pay legal costs for anti-fascists that are arrested in the process of rioting, smashing, and engaging in other mostly peaceful, violent riots. Now, besides hosting the Antifa Defense Fund and the Prostasia, which is a pedophile organization, and assorted Islamic and domestic terrorist organizations, the Action Network is a partner of the DNC. They have boasted on their front page that Kamala was able to raise $70 million through the Action Network. It's probably even more now. All sorts of Democrats are able to fundraise through the Action Network. So on the one hand, the split screen is you have Antifa and pedophiles and domestic terrorists and Islamic terrorists, and on the other side you have Kamala Harris. Now, the Action Network is a 501c4, which means that it is under IRS regulation. They've also got a 501c3 arm. They're a left-wing online fundraising group, and the IRS is, of course, once again, completely fine with all this. The IRS is not fine if you write anything negative about Hillary Clinton. It is, of course, completely fine if you fundraise money for violent riots and pedophilia and Kamala Harris, because those three are just go together so well.
Wow. You know, we're coming up on the anniversary of October 7th, and you've done a lot of writing about terrorists, or at least either terrorist organizations or terrorist sympathizing organizations. You know, linking the PLO, Hamas, again, with nonprofits in the United States that are either sympathetic to terrorists or outright supporting terrorists. How serious is that threat? And does that have links at all to the Democrat Party, or I suppose even the Republican Party, but we'll focus on the Democrat Party and Kamala Harris or Joe Biden with Hamas? I mean, how incestuous is that link to the nonprofit world here in America with Hamas and these other terrorist organizations?
Honestly, in the year or two that I've spent investigating the IRS's complicity, I honestly cannot tell you what it would take for a leftist or a nonprofit to actually lose its tax-exempt status by the IRS. I just cannot think of it. One of the worst examples is actually a clearinghouse for that was really started to help the Sandinistas that expanded to fund a variety of domestic terrorists and international terrorist groups. At one point, Samidun, which is an organization that was pretty clearly created to prop up the FFP terrorist group in Israel. They've also carried out attacks abroad. And Israel named Samidun one of the front groups for the PFLP, which means that banks and credit cards will no longer process payments for them because it's illegal. They have to ask people to send checks to them directly. Now, throughout all this, there's not a single financial institution, online financial institution, that will do business with them. The IRS, however, has allowed them to retain tax-exempt status. So the IRS has lower standards than every single financial institution that I can find. There's nothing you would do that will get the IRS to strip away their tax-exempt status unless they turn conservative.
Well, you know, it begs the question, Daniel, and again, maybe it's unanswerable. Where's Congress, right? I mean, the Republicans control the House. They've controlled the House for a number of years. We had the Senate for a while. They have oversight over that. Are they afraid of the IRS? I mean, why aren't there hearings on this? I mean, it's incredibly frustrating. You know, we can sit here and kind of, you know, whistle in the wind and try to, you know, raise the alarm bell and kind of be the Paul Revere, but where is Congress's and their accountability in all of this? I mean, I don't want to keep going on, but when you talk about the IRS, it's a war on children, it's a war on churches, it's a war on religion. It talks about the IRS complicit in the open borders and allowing these 501c3s that just allow all this terrorist and all the nonsense coming across the border. The media. How do we hold the IRS accountable? I mean, that's Congress's responsibility, but where are they? Just asleep? Are Republicans afraid to take on the IRS?
Where's Congress in general? I think that's a basic question to ask. Now, some of this information is hard to actually get to members of Congress because Congress is not doing its job, but is not actually holding the IRS accountable. And the IRS does react to political pressure. Back in the day, a guy named Newt actually started holding the IRS accountable. He started holding hearings. He actually brought out victims of IRS raids, and they testified in Congress, and the IRS began backing down. During the Tea Party crisis, the IRS actually got called in and they began backing down. The problem was that Congress, you know, as usual, okay, we held our hearings, we're good, everything's fine now, bye-bye. And, you know, the head of the IRS, the interim head appointed by Obama, said, this is absolutely an outrage, we're going to clean this up. And then once Congress stopped holding hearings, he issued a report saying, no, everything's perfectly fine. And this was the guy, by the way, that Biden brought in to head the IRS again. So you have to maintain scrutiny. Yes, you have to do hearings. You also have to maintain pressure, and you actually have to pass regulations. You know what? Republicans are always looking for issues that are popular, issues they can triangulate on. Very few people actually like the IRS. People dislike the IRS. If House Republicans actually take on the IRS, this will be a popular thing to do. Why they don't do this is utterly baffling.
I mean, the average person, you know, they can seize your business, they can seize your bank accounts. I can't imagine for the majority of Americans that they have fond feelings of the IRS. I mean, this should be kind of a slam dunk. I mean, whether, you know, we can close down the IRS completely or at least, you know, severely curtail their power, you know, it's mind boggling, but obviously something's going to need to be done in order to, you know, get relief for the American citizens and organizations from what the IRS, I mean, the Democrats are funneling millions of dollars into the IRS to hire more agents. So I don't see this getting any better anytime soon. But Obviously, it's incredibly frustrating. And in the articles, you don't pull any punches, Daniel. You talk about how it's not a left-wing organization that is getting Americans killed or opening the influence of China and all of these things and terrorism. You actually finger point the IRS saying they are getting Americans killed. And again, someone would read that and say, "Oh, come on, that's a little bit over the top." But you've got all the backing and the research. When you say the IRS is getting Americans killed or they have a war on churches, can you give an example or two of really some of the more you've done this now through the whole show, but any other examples you can give to kind of raise the awareness of just how dangerous, and I guess it leads in, how really serious is this deep state? How threatening are we from this deep state? And the IRS is obviously a big part of the deep state, I assume, right?
Well, it was a while back. David Horowitz wrote two important books. One was Leviathan, the other was The Shadow Party. Now, David has obviously been warning about the danger of nonprofit groups for a while, but behind these nonprofit groups, what allows all these nonprofit groups to function is, and I don't want to be a broken record here, but the IRS, without tax-deductible status for some of these organizations, the left's infrastructure would really not be able to function. It would not be such a fantastic tax dodge for guys like George Soros and so many other billionaires. Now, when it comes to actually getting people killed, one of the things we examined were bail funds. Now, Kamala Harris very famously promoted a bail fund. She's still promoting it. By the way, all her posts promoting it on social media are still up. And we actually found 10 people who were killed as a result of bail funds. Bail funds, by the way, are arguably illegal. And what they do is they set criminals loose. And it's not just, the social justice rhetoric about this person who was wrongly there, or they were just a nonviolent drug offender. They will set anybody free. Their mission is, you've shot somebody. If we can make bail for you, we will do it. You raped somebody, it's fine. And, we've tracked 10 murders, but there have been plenty of assaults, rapes, all sorts of horrific crimes, all traceable to bail funds. And we were talking a moment ago about open borders. And again, about the refusal of the IRS to suspend tax-deductible status for an organization, no matter how many things it does. There have been organizations where key figures have been arrested and actually put on trial, including with open borders. There were members of a group that were actually actively aiding and abetting illegal aliens entering the United States, not through recognized borders. And actually, they even had an Amazon wish list of stuff to get them. They were put on trial. The IRS did not suspend their tax-deductible status. Likewise, Stop Cop City or the Atlanta Forest Defenders who engaged in violent riots and assaults on police officers and straight-up domestic terrorism and arson. In Georgia, again, the IRS did not suspend their tax-deductible status, even when locally they were being treated as domestic terrorists, and they had a bulletin from Homeland Security stating that they're actually engaged in domestic terrorism. Still, the IRS did not suspend their tax-exempt status. And I don't even need to go into Black Lives Matter. One of my articles actually showed that there were in excess over 2,000 murders in 2020 as a result of BLM, and more murders since. So we're talking about thousands of people dead as a result.
Wow, it's mind-blowing. I don't know how you do it, Daniel, how you find the time to be able, but thank God that you do spend all this time and investigating and trying to enlighten us. I wanted to thank you for that. We've got a very important election, and again, we're not saying vote for this person or no, don't vote for someone else. It's a very important election, obviously. And I bring up again the Freedom Center under audit for supposedly electioneering by writing some columns critical of Hillary Clinton. Can you enlighten us a little bit about, there are left-wing nonprofits that are actively involved in electioneering. I don't think that's an exaggeration. Can you enlighten us at all about, again, the IRS has completely turned a blind eye to left-wing organizations that get involved in elections. I'm sure that's going to be happening over the next 2 months, but do you have some examples of nonprofits or organizations that are doing much more than writing a critical article about a candidate?
No, absolutely. In the last 6-7 years, nonprofits became a very vital part of the Democrat election strategy. Now, when we look at Republican and Democrat fundraising, we know we're given these totals. These totals are virtually meaningless because for Republicans, the totals are relatively total, whereas for the Democrats, they outsource much of their campaign operation to other organizations, whether it's the media for communications, but also to nonprofits. And they break up voter turnout into pieces. a key part of that piece is voter outreach, which is finding, registering voters. And they've outsourced much of that to nonprofits to the point where, particularly in the previous election, the 2020 election, pretty much every leftist organization jumped to get a piece of that action, including, by the way, organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center or the ACLU, where you would normally look at them and say they have this is absolutely not their lane, but they've all jumped on it because major donors, including Soros, were handing out huge amounts of money in order to actually be able to strongly influence an election and be able to produce tax-deductible donations. So you could actually fundamentally shift. Mark Zuckerberg came up with his own version of it.
Right.
But a lot of organizations on the ground, particularly in Georgia, we've profiled a number of them, including, by the way, again, the Southern Poverty Law Center, have actually been strongly engaged in what effectively is voter turnout, voter outreach. And they can do a lot of things. Yes, they also will register. They're set out to register voters, and they do so selective. Even the New York Times, when writing about it, talked about how they selectively target areas with Democrat voters. Then, of course, they will do voter informational materials. They're going to send voters information. And of course, that information is going to be slanted and it's going to be targeted at a particular voters. Yet there are nonprofits, C4s, but also some C3s that are doing this. And then they'll actually make sure the right sorts of voters are going to the polls. So they're going to bring out buses to bring them to the polls. And for Republican AGs or state law enforcement officials start saying this is illegal. No, you're denying elderly people a chance to get some water and some food. And you're not letting these elderly people, they go into nursing homes. They take everybody in the nursing home and drive them over, in some cases, against the wishes of the nursing home staff. At this point, they've come up with all sorts of great things like Vote ER, in which they're, getting doctors to make sure the patients on their deathbeds are going to fill out the ballot. They're going to make sure harvest as much votes as possible. And they're outsourcing so much of this to 501c3s and 501c4s. And 501c4s, yes, can engage in political advocacy. They're not supposed to engage in actual election interference like this. They're supposed to actually engage in direct electioneering. They're supposed to be able to lobby for their political views. And those regulations have all been stomped all over.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, I wanted to have more of a general question, Daniel, just again, trying to, what's the solution? Remember when Ronald Reagan became president, he said he wanted to close down the Department of Education. There were some other departments, and look, Reagan was a great president, did wonderful things. He did not shut down the Department of Education. He didn't shut down any of the departments that I know of. Donald Trump, I think his instincts and his gut, his heart was in the right place. We didn't get any, there wasn't any large agencies that were shut down. And I don't even know, maybe you could answer this question. I don't know if a president can just go in and say, we're going to shut down an entire department. Maybe the administrative state is so deep that it takes something else, or maybe it's Congress that has to cut the funding. What would it take? I mean, not just the IRS, but a number of these out of control federal agencies. If a Donald Trump got elected or someone else, J.D. Vance in the future, whoever, will they be able to really gut the deep state and do what is necessary? Or is this something I fear that is just, it's beyond our reach, and we're going to be living with this deep state for a long time?
We don't have to live with it if we choose not to. Now, Democrats, particularly the left, is never, stopped by the idea of we can't do this. They never say we can't do this. I remember there was the whole Obamacare debate. You can't pass Obamacare through reconciliation. They went ahead and did it anyway. You can't do unilateral amnesty. They went ahead and did it anyway. They will just go ahead and do whatever it is they want. And in recent years, Republicans have gotten somewhat better just going ahead. No, you can't get rid of Roe v. Wade. Well, we went ahead and got rid of it.
Yeah.
It is entirely doable if you actually go ahead and want to do this. The problem is that so many Republicans don't want to do this. Now, in Reagan's defense, he had a Democratic Congress. That's not been the case for a number of administrations where there have been Republican majorities, at least for 2 years, and still they did nothing. They couldn't even actually manage to fundamentally shift budget priorities. And that is very much due to inaction. It's due to party dysfunction, due to the fact that, government gets its power from the money it spends and not the money it doesn't spend. And that's been a major problem for a while. Can you shrink down federal agencies? You can, and you can actually be creative about it. One of the great things that Trump did in his first term, which I don't think he gets enough credit for, was actually saying, okay, we're going to move over BLM, not, the throwing Molotov cocktails BLM and scoring racist graffiti BLM, but the Bureau of Land Management, which is one of the most destructive federal agencies, now, by the way, under the control of an eco-terrorist, an actual eco-terrorist under Biden. They could just do chapter and verse on this. But they decided, you guys are going to pick up and move to Colorado. And Colorado's great. No, we were just in Colorado. Great weather, sunshine year round, but a whole bunch of these DC swamp creatures decided we don't want to go to Colorado. So it is something you can do. You can take parts of the federal government, you can actually move it out of DC. And then a whole bunch of these people are going to leave because they do not want to actually leave DC. That is something you can do. It's called, federal self-deportation. You can get, yes, you can get them to deport themselves. But can you shut down federal agencies? Yes, you can. We've had a very bad cycle where we've just created federal agencies. We haven't reduced any of them. I can't think of a federal agency that we've gotten rid of in 70, 80 years or so, unless it's to absorb it into an even bigger federal agency. And that is a problem. And yes, Congress can cut funding. Congress could actually start zeroing out funding for it. But also, the Trump administration, the Vance administration, whatever, if they're serious about it, can actually take a lot of federal agencies and send them elsewhere. No, we are moving the EPA headquarters to Nome, Alaska. We're going to provide you with a nice relocation to care about the environment. We are going to give you a very nice environment next to an igloo.
Well, you're right. I mean, that was a great move by President Trump. And, if he gets elected again, hopefully he'll double down and really enforce that. That would be great. And maybe we can get some agencies closed. I want to ask you, Daniel, we only have a few minutes left, but can you give kind of a preview? I know we've spoken, internally with the center. What's coming up from the investigative projects? What either pamphlets or ebooks or special projects can you give us kind of a teaser on a couple of particular topics that you're going to be announcing a release of over the next, let's say, 2 months or next few months?
Well, you showed off our Beijing Biden pamphlet. We've got one coming up about Kamala. Her name doesn't rhyme with a B, so it's not going to be Beijing Kamala, but it is actually going to be alliterative and is actually going to look into a lot of information about her past, about her record, about the people in her circle that people may not know about, certainly that the media is not going to tell you about. And it's not going to have the J word, the word joy in it. It is going to have the C word in it, which is corruption.
Well, that was great. We look forward to that, Daniel. I don't know if you have anything else that you wanted to add or anything else that you think our audience needs to hear about the investigative project, the work that you're doing, and really how it's so critical that we get this message out there. I mean, it's endless. I mean, you need 40 hours a day to be able to investigate the corruption in the deep state. And I suppose every time you peel off one layer, then much more. There's so much beneath that. Don't get depressed because you're digging into things that are really destructive and it could destroy our free republic. So I wanted to thank you for all the work you're doing. I don't know if you have anything else to add before we wrap up, but I wanted to thank you again for your work and everything you're doing for not just for the center, obviously, but for America and trying to protect us and preserve this great republic. It's a daunting task, and thank God you're doing what you're doing, Daniel.
And thank you for your leadership for moving the Freedom Center forward. And by the way, I didn't properly acknowledge Discover the Networks earlier. Discover the Networks is a fantastic resource that people should absolutely use. The work that John Perazzo does, that Discover the Networks does. I kind of take things and break them down into a digestible fashion, but John really has these fantastic databases, and they're absolutely of use to whether you're a congressional investigator or just a local citizen. This is stuff you really should be using and delving into.
That's great. And we'll both get admonished if we don't say something nice about Jamie. Jamie Glazov, of course, the editor of frontpagemag.com with the Freedom Center and the host of the Glazov Gang. So thank you, Jamie, for everything you're doing. I would urge, I think most of the people that are listening to the show do go to Front Page. Hopefully that's the frontpagemag.com is the first website you go to every morning to get incredible reporting and news and to read Daniel. So thank you, Jamie. Please, again, support Jamie's work at the Glazov Gang. And if you can support the Freedom Center and Freedom Center Investigates and the work of Daniel, go to Front Page and donate whatever you can. We need your help. America needs your help. And I'm going to say goodnight. I think that's it. Thank you, Daniel. And until the next episode, it's great to be with you. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.